Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I will be the host for the podcast today. I am also the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. It is Thursday, October 31st. It is Halloween. So if you're celebrating Halloween, happy Halloween. Unfortunately, I am not wearing a costume. And as much as I tried to get our guests to wear a costume, it just didn't work out. I mean, I'm still hopeful. So, you never know. So at any rate, if you're not familiar with the Alliance and who we are and what we're doing, let me tell you a little bit about who we are before we get started. The Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was formed about 5.5 years ago. We started I started the Alliance because of a personal experience. I had experience with my son, physical restraint and seclusion in the school, and began to really look at why these things were happening, who they were happening to, and ultimately what we could do differently. The Alliance is really about trying to change, not only policies, but practice and trying to affect a positive change. So we do a lot of work around punitive exclusionary discipline, but also really in efforts to better support all human beings in ways that really make a positive difference. If you have joined us here before, a couple of quick notes. One is that this is being recorded. So when we do these live, they are live on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We also make it available on all of those platforms after the fact. So you can go back and watch it if you're not able to watch the whole thing right now. And if you prefer to listen, maybe on the go or in your car or while you're walking or jogging or whatever you might be doing, you can, within a couple days, you'll be able to download it from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts as well. So we make it available in an audio-only podcast version as well. Really excited about our guest today. I've got one of my favorite people in the world joining us here today. I've got Ginger Healy, and I'll tell you more about Ginger here in a moment and bring Ginger up to say hello. But we've got a great topic we're going to be exploring today, and we're going to be talking about accessible neuroscience and connecting strategies. And I think this will be really interesting. So we will see Ginger here in a moment. But before we do, I just want to mention that we are fortunate to have some sponsors that help us to bring this podcast to you. And that's really helpful because, of course, this takes time and resources and all of those things. And we've had a couple great sponsors this year that have helped us to bring the podcast to you. One of the sponsors is Connie Persick and Supportable Solutions. Supportable Solutions is really a kind of educational consulting firm. They develop something called the Why Toolkit, which you're going to learn about here in just a moment, and do some amazing work. And want to thank Supportable Solutions for being a sponsor. And let me share a little something here with you about the Why Toolkit.
Behaviors are signals to the deeper whys. The Why Toolkit, a tool built for and approved by teachers, parents, and administrators that can both assess and support individuals struggling with behaviors. Connie has created a document that turns typical behavioral documents upside down and replaces them with a deep dive into what really matters: how to support each child within a compassionate and relational framework based on their individual differences. The Why Toolkit was found to decrease seclusion and restraint by 21% in a year-long pilot study.
And it is available now. We encourage you to check it out. Even if you're, whether you're an educator and want to use it in your school, or you're a parent and think it might be helpful for your school to use, you can actually get a single license, which I think is about $20 or so. Check it out and see if it's something you think will be helpful. And we want to thank Supportable Solutions for their support of our podcast. And before I bring Ginger up, which is why you're here and what you're excited about, I just want to mention, as always, it is really a lot of fun to know who's joining us, where you're from. I always like to see that we've got a lot of people that are returning every time we do one of these events. We have people from all over the world that join us. We have people from, of course, the United States and Canada and Australia, New Zealand. We have people that have joined us from really all over. So it's fun to see who you are and where you're from. So if you happen to be watching live right now, let us know in the chat. If you're on a platform that supports chat, let us know who you are and where you're from, and we'll give you a quick hello here as well. So with that said, let's get to why we're here and what you're excited about. I see Ginger has now joined us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ginger here. And I've fortunately had the privilege of knowing Ginger for some time, but I'm going to read you a little bio, and then I'm probably going to ad-lib here a bit. Ginger started her career as a child abuse investigator, hospital social worker, and school therapist. Spent about 15 years as a social service supervisor at an international adoption agency, where she learned about developmental trauma and attachment needs in children. She is currently a clinical social worker, which explains a lot because any of you that watch frequently know that social workers are some of my favorite people. And also the director of programs at the Attachment Trauma Network, which is a fantastic organization. She co-anchors the podcast Regulated and Relational with our other friend, Julie Beem, the executive director of the Attachment Trauma Network. Ginger speaks and teaches across the nation on trauma-informed school and therapeutic parenting. And Ginger, I see you going more and more places, it seems like every day. Ginger is the author of Regulation and Co-Regulation, Accessible Neuroscience that Brings Calm into the Classroom. She also is the author of an accompanying workbook that aims to reach beyond the classroom for caregivers and child-serving professionals. Her third book just came out, and I actually haven't gotten that one yet, so that's on my list here. Managing Big Emotions, Identifying Triggers, Developing Coping Strategies, and Communicating Effectively, and that was just released this month. So you have been busy. You continue to be very busy. And of course, you've been doing some really amazing work, and the work that you do with the Attachment Trauma Network, which is a fantastic organization. Of course, you have your Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools conference that you do as part of the organization. Lots of great work. So we are thrilled to have you here today and thrilled to have you sharing a presentation to give us more insight into the work that you do. So welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here. I just always love sharing space with you and your organization and your followers. We're just so mission aligned. We just have a heart for each other.
I got to tell you, before we went on, we were talking about Halloween and you were talking about, your costume, and that comment you just made would have been so much better if you had been wearing your costume. So, if I'm sharing too much, I'm sorry, but you have an astronaut costume, and when you talk about aligned missions and sharing space, I imagined you with your astronaut helmet on here for a second.
Commander Healy in another life, but I just couldn't get through the physics and the math, and I went the social worker route, because I'm a people person, not that astronauts aren't, but
well, one day they're going to need social workers in space. So, there's still hope here. Again, if you're watching live, let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. I've got Melissa here who has joined us from Wisconsin and said hello, and hopefully we'll get a couple of other people that will say hello. But you've got a presentation for us today, and you're going to be talking about some of your work. And of course, you've got a number of books that have come out really just fairly recently. I mean, it seems like every time I look, it's like there's a new book from Ginger. You are very busy. Do you have a copy of your new one there to hold up?
Yes. Okay. Here we go. So this is the first book, and you may have that, but I just love it because it's just easy and accessible. And then the accompanying workbook. Now look, they look a lot alike. So if you're on Amazon and you're confused, the workbook is bigger and thicker, but it dives deeper. And there's even a chapter on nurturing neurodivergence that I'm just so proud of. It's so near and dear to my heart. I have two autistic kids that I just love so much. And then the third book came out a week ago today. It's a brand new baby. So, and again, look, not too, not too big, but this is a great one because it's you can modify and adapt it to do anything you want it to do, but it's designed for small groups. So if you have a group of kids, whether it be in your classroom, whether if you're a school counselor, whether you're at home, these are more all the work is done for you. It's just group lessons, and there's games and there's stories. It's so much fun. And it's just designed to make it just easy because it's so hard to come up with the ideas and come up with so it's done for you. So all those three books really overlap and have great information, about accessible neuroscience and about soothing the nervous system and about managing and regulating and mostly co-regulating. There's the answer. We could stop the podcast right here if we just left you with it. Really all comes down to co-regulation and relationships. So
absolutely. Yeah. And that the book and the workbook, the first book that you introduced, really does such an amazing job of taking neuroscience, which sounds really complicated, right? That sounds like physics and those other things you were talking about, and really kind of making it approachable, accessible, and applicable. And that's what you do so well. So we're going to let you get started here with your presentation in a moment. I'll just mention one more. We have Tanya here, occupational therapist, joining us from Indianapolis. And hopefully others will weigh in and say hello as well. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. So I'm going to go ahead and bring your presentation up on the stage here so everybody can see it. And we agreed that you would kind of run through your presentation. People are welcome to put questions in at any time, and you don't have to, of course, keep an eye on those. We will. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to disappear while you present, and then I'm going to come back when you're done.
Well, don't disappear.
You don't want me to disappear? Okay.
Okay. I can move my own slides. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. Can I disappear now?
I just didn't want you to disappear until we knew that
here's the thing. I can magically reappear when you say my name. That's right. So you don't have to say it 3 times or anything like that. Just say my name and I'll reappear. I'm going to be just off stage here. So what we're going to do is have you kind of run through your presentation. If people have questions, they can put them in the chat at any time. At the end of your presentation, we will see if there's any questions that have gone up. I'll probably have questions or things that I want to talk about with you as well. And then we will go from there. So let's go ahead and let you take over, and I will vanish.
It is Halloween after all.
That's right. That's right.
So we can work our magic.
All right. I'll see you in a moment.
All right. Well, thank you. I just will pause on this first slide just so that you can know how to reach out to me. The Attachment and Trauma Network was an agency started over 25 years ago. In fact, this coming year is their 30th anniversary, and it was started by moms who had adopted kids internationally and needed support and resources and help. And so that's how I got involved, because I am a mom, and that's my most important job, and the job that is the hardest. And we adopted our oldest son from Romania. He is 26 years old, and he came to us when he was 5 years old, and I needed resources and support. And I was an adoption social worker. I kind of thought that I knew everything, but surprise, I knew nothing that I needed to know about attachment and about wounds that come from early adversity in childhood. And so that is why I am so passionate about this work. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to the Attachment and Trauma Network, who have so many resources available. So there's your website there. And then I also have my own website, gingerhealy.com. And then there's my email, ginger@attachedtrauma.org. So you can get a hold of me. We can troubleshoot things in the classroom, things in your home, and I can be a support to you. So there you go. Okay, let's talk about the brain, because what happens in the brain in early childhood, even in the womb, will impact the child for the rest of their life. So if there is any kind of abuse, any kind of neglect, trauma, then that is going to impact brain development. And we learn from Dr. Bruce Perry and other neuroscientists that stress hormones cross the placental barrier, which means if the mother has a particularly toxic, stressful life, whether it be because of domestic violence or anything, her history of trauma, right? There's a million different things that can traumatize and can activate the nervous system and can cause these stress hormones to be constantly flooding the body. Then those stress hormones cross the placental barrier and will impact the brain development of the fetus. So we have to know that, because we need to, as a society, as a community, wrap our arms and resources and support around birth mothers in order to wrap our arms around all children, right? So brain development is impacted. Now, we know that through the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey studies that any adversity in childhood before the age of 18, right, will impact the nervous system, will impact brain development, and will sensitize over or undersensitize a nervous system. And so that's what I'm talking about here as I'm talking about neuroscience, as I'm talking about the nervous system. This is why I'm talking about it, because sadly, adversity in childhood is not uncommon, right? So in any classroom and in any home, there is going to be adversity, but there is good news as well, and that's that we can change the brain. We can soothe the nervous system. We can rewire an inner working model, which is a belief about ourselves. We can change that, right? We have the power to heal children's brains. And so I love to talk about that. And what I mostly focus on, especially when I'm talking to teachers and educators, is this little 4-tenant trauma-informed school information, which is that we start with safety, physical safety, yes, but emotional safety, felt safety, that the nervous system feels safe. Safety first, right? Safety first and always. Once a child feels safe, then they can manage their emotions. They can learn self-regulation skills, but it is done through co-regulation. It's done through connection. It's done through safe relationship. When those things are in place, safety, regulation, connection, guess what happens? The child can learn, the child can grow, the child can thrive. So we're talking about schools, but same thing with the home. You can equate learning with growing, changing, thriving, right? Improving. So that's the goal. And this is how you get there, is through safety, regulation, and connection. Bruce Perry teaches us that our history of connectedness, safe relationship, right? That is the better predictor of our health, physical, emotional, mental health. That is a better predictor than our history of adversity. And I love that, because we need to learn from ACEs, but we don't need to sit there. We need to now change. And how do we do that? Because ACEs aren't a diagnosis, and they aren't a doomsday outcome, right? ACE, if you have adversity in childhood, you are at higher risk for mental, emotional, physical health problems, for relationship problems, right? For health outcomes. But that's all it is. It's a risk. We can overcome that risk, and how we do that is what he's talking about here, connectedness, right? That's how we predict. So we don't focus on the adversity, we focus on the positive experiences. And I always talk about attachment. I work for the Attachment and Trauma Network, but it is this beautiful knowledge that attachment, or safe relationship, right? It starts in early childhood, but it impacts us for the rest of our lives. And often attachment is the less spoken of topic. But to me, the Attachment and Trauma Network knew exactly what they were doing when they put this network together, focusing on attachment, focusing on trauma-informed, attachment-focused strategies. They knew that is how we heal. We heal through attachment. So let me just talk a little bit about it, so that it helps to better understand how attachment impacts us. So when we are born vulnerable and completely helpless. We have to have an adult care for us. We can't care for ourselves. We can't communicate our needs other than through crying. And so many times a day, as a newborn parent will attest, the baby cries. And then the adult tries to figure out, are they hungry? Are they tired? Do they need a diaper change? What is it that the baby needs? But all we know is that the baby has a need. So the parent or caregiver or whoever attempts to meet the need and meets the need of the child. And every time that need is met, trust starts to develop and build. other things start to develop and build. An inner sense of belonging starts to develop. We belong to someone who cares for us, right? We matter. We are worthy of having our needs met. All these little thoughts are starting to build and grow inside of us. Now, we cannot meet the needs of the infant immediately, every time, perfectly. And I love that attachment science tells us that good enough parenting is about meeting the needs about 30% of the time. And typically we meet the needs more than that. But what it tells us is that, one, we can make mistakes, which is great because we do, because we're human. And two, those mistakes can be very valuable. They allow us to apologize. They allow us to strengthen the relationship by repairing what didn't happen the first time. Repair the rupture is what we call it. So that's good enough parenting. Now, if a child's needs are not met consistently, though, what happens when that baby cries and the needs aren't met is that instead of trust developing, the child starts to mistrust because they cannot predict what is going to happen next. And unpredictability is a trauma. And the child starts to build this inner working model and belief system about themselves that they must not matter. No one cares enough to meet my needs. I'm not worthy of having my needs met. I don't matter. My needs don't matter. And I don't think I can trust any adult, right? And so the world becomes very unsafe, very unpredictable, and walls start to build. So think of those kids that you know that no matter how hard you work to help, befriend, caregive, it's hard. You're bumping up against a wall. And it could be because of early adversity. It could be because of unmet needs. Neglect is even harder because it's so unpredictable. It really skews the child's brain and model of the world and how they view themselves. So these early attachment and meeting needs of children predictably and consistently is so essential. Sometimes when I give this talk, it gets a little, and for me as a mom, I start feeling guilt, right? But that's why I always talk about that we can repair ruptures in relationships and how powerful that is. So I don't want anyone to feel guilt for not being the perfect parent or the perfect teacher or the perfect therapist or anything, because we are all very human and we're joining in this journey together with the children to heal them and heal ourselves. So this is just more talking about really attachment. That's the antidote, right? That's the answer. That is how we heal. And if the trauma happened in relationship with someone, that is how we heal the trauma, is through relationship, positive, safe, healthy relationship, attuned, committed, supportive, safe relationship, right? So relationships, they are a key factor when we're talking about how to build resilience. We don't do that on our own. We're not born with the ability to have grit and to persevere. We are born wired to connect with others, and those safe relationships help us whenever there's a struggle, a problem, a bump in the road that we need to overcome. That's what resilience is. We do that through safe relationship and having someone there to guide us through. So that's where I get to start talking about co-regulation. I think a lot of us nowadays we hear regulation a lot, self-regulation skills, emotional regulation, and it's a goal. And it's not at all a bad goal. But what is misunderstood is how we get there. We often want to jump to kids need to have emotional regulation. They need to control their behaviors. They need to manage their emotions. They need to get control. And so we put in these goals that a child will be able to self-regulate. And what's really misunderstood about that is that regulation only comes after co-regulation. We have to have that other relationship. Now, we can't always be there. We're not going to hold a child's hand throughout their whole entire life, right? But so as we grow, we become more independent and we become more self-sufficient. That is true. That is great. We do want our children to launch, right? But we just can't jump to that. We always first will need the co-regulation. So we want to start very young, right? As infants, we co-regulate when we rock the baby. How do we soothe the baby? We rock them. We coo with them. We meet those basic needs. We feed them. We help them sleep. But it's physical touch. It's cadence of voice, right? And it's consistent, predictable caregiving, right? That builds that foundation for regulation. So we're always doing that. And that's what co-regulation is. But we tend to forget that we got to keep that going, right? That need never ends. Although, like I said, we become more independent and self-sufficient, the need for others never ends. People die of broken hearts. They die of loneliness. We always need others. And so the best, quickest, easiest way to soothe the nervous system, right, is through co-regulation. So I focus, when I talk about, steps to regulation, I spend very little time talking about the regulation piece, and I spend the majority of the time talking about the co-regulation piece. To me, that is the meat. And I don't mind talking about the others, but I'm going to spend most of my time here because if I run out of time, I want this to be the focus. So how do we co-regulate, and what does that look like? Well, it is being present, right? Physically and emotionally, right? If we are on our phones, then maybe we're in proximity and we're touching, but we're not necessarily present. So being available and attuned. But let me caveat that because I have 2 autistic kids and they don't necessarily feel comfortable with me looking them in the eye and touching them and really asking them and probing them a lot of questions. So a lot of the co-regulation with my son in particular, it is just sitting side by side and him knowing I am there. I'm not leaving your side, right? So it does depend on the person and what is comfortable for them. So being present and reflecting back calm, we have these neurons in our brain called mirror neurons that reflect each other, which just means that emotions are contagious. And we can control the emotions if we are calm. Then our child or our student in our classroom or whoever, can even be an adult, of course, can lean on our calm. They can borrow our calm. So that is co-regulation, that borrowing and leaning and reflection of calm. Now, let me also caveat by saying calm gets misunderstood. When I say calm, it's not that I want or expect a child to be quiet, to sit there and listen, to be compliant, to settle down, to shut up. That is not what I mean. Calm is a brain state and a nervous system state. And all that calm means when I'm talking about the nervous system in the brain is it means steady or soothed or regulated. So reflect back It's an energy level too, right? Sometimes we need energy and sometimes we need less energy. We need soothing and calming. So it depends, but we reflect back whatever that child needs. Do they need energy? Do they need soothing? Do they need comfort? Do they need a steady, regulated state? That's what we reflect back, that it's okay. You're safe with me. So reflection can go either way, right? Because we all know that a dysregulated child can dysregulate an adult, and a dysregulated adult can dysregulate a child, right? So our states and our energy and our emotions and moods are all very contagious. And then the other thing that is really important when talking about co-regulation is this ability to hold space, which just means you are just providing this metaphorical bubble space, however you want to look at it. Sometimes I just picture it in my hand, like I'm holding this moment for you. You are struggling and I see it. I will not leave you in your struggle. I'm going to be here throughout your struggle. Now, sometimes that looks like I'm letting the child get away with something. It gets misunderstood. But as we talk about the brain science, I'll explain that you cannot reason with a child, argue with a child, talk to a child. If they're dysregulated, they won't be able to understand or process or accept that. It won't help. It will just pour gasoline on the fire. So until that child is regulated, we hold space for that and we go through that emotion with them. Emotions aren't bad. They are what they are. Feelings, there's a reason for them. So we don't want to say stop crying, get over it. It's no big deal. That's the opposite of holding space. Holding space would be, I see you're struggling. I'm here when you're ready. And oftentimes it's not even saying any words because words don't get processed during dysregulation. But a soothing tone, cadence, slow voice gets processed as safety. So it's all about creating safety. Let me see if I can. Why am I having trouble advancing my slides? Okay. Co-regulation is the opposite of co-escalation. We have a lot of power as adults to make things worse, right? So if we're yelling, if our eyes are narrowed, clenched fists, blaming, shaming, all of that, right? It just makes it worse. But if we can have a warm, soft, gentle gaze and be at their level, avoiding judgment, that's the holding space piece. And just listening. I know I'm making this sound easier than it is. I know when voices are loud and things are being thrown, it's not easy to have this calm demeanor that I'm portraying right now. I get that. I totally get that. So give yourself permission to make mistakes. Give yourself permission to not get it right. But just try to think about how you're feeling and how you can share that with the child amidst dysregulation, right? So sometimes I have to really take a breath and pause. And even sometimes I have to, take a break and come back when I'm ready. Safety first, right? It all depends on safety. So, and it does make a difference, your own children in your home versus children in the classroom. I get that too. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And these are just suggestions. I also want to talk a little bit about what co-regulation is versus isn't, because it often gets misunderstood. I hear a lot of teachers say, we're letting kids get away with bad behavior if we're not giving consequences, if we're not punishing, if we're not holding them accountable. And all those words get really jumbled up and misunderstood. So what I want to say is that really co-regulation is actually a higher standard because it's harder. It's teaching how to manage our emotions. So it's about having compassion when they're struggling rather than saying stop. They can't, right? At that moment, they cannot do that, right? It's not behavior focused. It's focusing on the relationship. And I find myself saying that as I speak and teach all the time, focus on the relationship, not the behavior. The behavior will change, but we have to start with the relationship first and the safety first. It's not co-regulation. It's not about our agenda, which is really hard. I know, especially as a teacher who has curriculum to teach, but we have to stop, because if there's dysregulation in the classroom, no one's listening anyway. The curriculum isn't being absorbed, right? It's not working anyway. So we have to stop. It creates a very teachable moment when we pause and say, okay, I think we need a break. I think we need some deep breaths. I think we need to move. I think John needs help and we can help him. However it looks like, it depends on the situation, right? But it's not overly permissive. It really is not. There is boundaries, there is rules. It's a balance of structure and nurture. Of course, there has to be the compassion and the nurture there, but it can't be overly permissive. That doesn't help anyone. And it can't be too structured, right? We have to have flexibility. It's this balance. It's a tricky balance, but it really does need structure, because structure and predictability, routine and boundaries are safe. They feel safe because they're predictable. So we have to have a balance of both. Okay. So just as kind of some final thoughts on this is that try to remain present, right? And get really curious. What's really happening here? If this child is displaying anger, frustration, overwhelm, really what could be happening? Because oftentimes when we peel back the layers, it's not anger. It is anger, but anger is often a bodyguard for fear, right? It's often fear and it's often shame. Those are typically the answer. What is really setting off this child's threat detection system that they're worried about? What's going on that they're fearful about? And, or, what is this about that they often with shame, it's if they feel stupid, if they feel incompetent or something like that, right? And it sets off these behaviors. So get curious, put on the detective hat and really try to figure out what's underneath, because if we just stop at trying to stop the behavior, we don't stop it in the long term and we don't heal in the long term. So really try to figure it out. And then of course, always check in with yourself, because speaking personally, it's really easy once I'm regulated to become dysregulated. Or if I'm already dysregulated, I got to own that. I got to realize it's me, right? It all comes down to me. I'm the strategy. The adult is the strategy. So it really matters how I'm feeling, what's going on inside me. That child can't borrow my steady, regulated, soothed state if I don't have that, right? So I oftentimes need to take a break and acknowledge it. Say it out loud. I'm struggling. I need a break. I need help here. And that's going to look different in the classroom. I am going to get to some strategies when you're a teacher. You can't always just take a break. I get that. So let's talk about that. But practice, make mistakes, all of that. And then, of course, active listening. Okay, I don't think we've got much time for this, but I just wanted a little bit of neuroscience here, just so simplified that you can teach kids that they have the upstairs part of their brain and the downstairs part. And if they're feeling dysregulated and they're not able to meet the expectations, fight, flight, freeze, all of that, then they're in that downstairs part. And that's when they're reactive, right? And they're seeking safety. And so that's how we have to respond. That if we go in with reasoning and lecturing and what we need to do, they don't have access to that upstairs part of the brain during dysregulation, okay? So we have to get them there. So I'm going to talk about how to do that. This is the neurosequential model, which just means neurobrain sequence, how we engage the brain sequentially in order to reach that upstairs top part of the brain. Because what's at that top part of the brain is all the things we needed to be successful in school and life, right? Executive functioning skills, planning, reasoning, reflecting. We need that, but we don't have access to that if we're dysregulated. So that's that upside down triangle is a heuristic of the brain that's just very simplified, saying if the child is dysregulated, they're in the bottom part of their brain. So we need to meet them there. The only thing that a downstairs part of the brain can absorb and digest and listen to is safe relationship regulation, which means we have to soothe them and meet their basic needs. Do they need a drink? Do they need something to eat? Do they need movement? Most oftentimes, movement. Do we need to go on a walk? Right? So in the classroom, if you've got all your kids, then take a brain break, right? Take a 1-minute dance party. Do some stretching, do some deep breathing. That will help with the dysregulation, that will help regulate the dysregulation, and doing it together is the co-regulation part. So then we're moving up. Once that child is less dysregulated, you can kind of, regulate and relate with them. That's that safe relationship, the building of trust. And then eventually you can reason with them and talk about what happened. What can we do so it won't happen again? Talk me back, reason with them, right? So that's the sequence. That's where we go. And it's so hard. Oftentimes with my kids, I immediately start in with the lecture and I have to go, oh my gosh, right? It's like an automatic thing I want to do, but it never works. I wonder why. I'm trying to talk to their top part of their brain, but they're not there. They're in the bottom part of the brain. So I have to start there. And then the lecture just needs to not be, it needs to be talking it out if possible. Now with neurodivergent kids, this may look very different, right? We're not necessarily, depending on the child, talking it out. So let's move along and hopefully we'll kind of get to all those little details. But here's what I also want to say. Do you remember when I talked about the attachment cycle and how we start, if our needs are not consistently, predictably met, we start to build this inner working model that looks like someone who does not trust others. And you know those people, and maybe you're one of these people who has a thick wall, who's very protective of yourself. I get it. This is called blocked care. And so if you're working with a child, whether it be in your home or at the school, and you're just not getting through, please understand this may not at all be your fault. This could be that the child is blocking your bids for connection because they don't feel safe and they don't trust. It happens all the time. And we as adults can block the care too. I've done that myself. If I am really tired and if I'm hangry, if I have not taken care of myself, if I am burnt out and I have nothing left in the tank, teachers, I see you out there, right? Then it is really hard to care. It is really hard to be compassionate. It is really hard to have patience. And so sometimes we put up a wall and we're like, not today. Sorry, can't. I just don't have it. So know that that's happens and that this is why, and also know that we can break down the wall. We can chip down the wall and we can help. And here's what helps. Therapeutic dosing. When I learned about therapeutic dosing, oh my goodness, that was like one of the best light bulb moments of my life. And it's this, and this is from Dr. Bruce Perry. the brain and nervous system respond positively to very small moments of positive, safe connection. Therapeutic just means healing. So like, you don't have to be a therapist, right? It just means that you're sharing a moment of positive healing. So what does this look like? Okay, you guys, it can look like a fist bump. It can look like a high five. It can look like a hug. It's a small moment where you are saying or portraying to the child, I see you. I hear you. You're okay. I'm here, right? That's all it is. It's the sharing of a moment where they know you got them, right? And so I love teaching this, especially to teachers, because listen, educators, the last thing I want to do is say, you need to do this, 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 this. You're already doing too much. You've already got too much on your plate that's impossible. You cannot do what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to do more than is possible. So know that, okay? And so if you just want to walk away with one thing, it's that every time you smile at a student, every time you give them a high five, every time you let them know that you see them and value them, that is a therapeutic dose. And those moments will accumulate and build. Okay, therapeutic dosing. And then I'm just going to next quickly talk about anchors and otter buddies, the PACE model, completing the stress cycle, and community care. Those are also things that will help with blocked care and are co-regulatory and will shift the nervous system and heal the brain. So I love talking about otters. I think, looking at the time, that I'm probably going to go quickly through this, but I love otters because we can learn how to co-regulate from them. They're like the ultimate co-regulators. They do this cutest thing called rafting. They wrap their paws around each other and hold each other tight. Why do they do that? Because they are on the water, and there is going to be wind, and there's going to be storms and lightning and thunder and waves, and they do not want to lose each other. They don't want to drift away. They don't want anybody to get lost. So they hold tight to each other, right? The other thing otters do is they wrap their bodies in kelp and their tails, right? They're wrapping themselves in this seaweed. Now, this seaweed is anchored to the bottom of the ocean or the river, right? It's not going anywhere. So when you're tightly woven and anchored and secure, when the winds and storm and all that come, you're not going to get lost, right? You're going to remain steady. And it's a beautiful metaphor for what we can do for ourselves and for the children that are entrusted in our care. I want you to think about who are your otter buddies? Who has your back when the storms come? Who can you link to and hold tight to that will steady you during your storms? And if you want to put them in the chat, you can do that. What I do want you to put in the chat is who and what are your anchors. So talk to me about anchors, right? What does an anchor do? It steadies. What keeps you grounded, steadied, motivated, and keeps you going during the storms? It can be a friend, it can be a spouse, right? It can also be a guardian angel. I think of my grandmother who just loved me unconditionally. She's my guardian angel now because she's passed away. But her love I can still lean on because I know she thinks I'm like the most amazing person in the world. And so when I'm feeling down, I think, oh, what would grandma tell me to do right now? Right? That's an anchor for me. It could be, I have these little pocket stones, worry stones on my desk, and sometimes I just rub them. It's like a regulation tool. It grounds me. keeps me in the present. So it can be something as simple as that. It can be a spiritual or religious connection that gives you like motivation and a belief in a higher power that calms you and steadies you. So think about your otter buddies and your anchors. Okay, the other thing we want to get to is this PACE model. This is by Dr. Dan Hughes. He is brilliant. His work and Dr. John Balin's I highly recommend. And I did put together a slide that has resources, so those will be made available to you. But Dr. Hughes talks about that we need to pace, which means we need to keep it playful in the classroom, at home, in anywhere that we're working with a child, because play feels safe. You cannot play or relax and have fun if you're scared. So if you are doing something fun with a child, it looks like so many different things at so many ages, right? It's going to look different with a teenager than a very young child. But if you're having fun and being playful, it will send the message of emotional safety. It will shift the nervous system. So being playful and then accepting the emotions, which means, do you remember when I talked about holding space? It means that we just sit there for a minute and go, okay, here's what's happening. We don't rush to stop the behavior. I mean, safety is always of importance, but oftentimes it's something that we can just sit with for a minute until the moment ends. And then getting curious, figuring out what's underneath the behavior. That's how we get to the root of it. And then, of course, exuding that empathy. Like, I have had hard days too. I've made mistakes too. I get it, and I'm here with you. So that PACE model is easy, quick, and brilliant. Okay, completing the stress cycle. Now, toxic stress will build in your body. We have stress hormones, and we need them, but we only need them for a short time. When that moment ends, the stress should end and the stress hormone should leave the body. That's the theory. But the problem is that often, many of us, the stress never ends. It accumulates and it builds. And if you are in a situation where you are in a relationship or a job that is stressful and you can't leave it, then that stress is going to build because you have to deal with it every day. So instead of letting the stress hormones build in your body, because if they continue to build, they become toxic and poison you, leading to health problems like heart attack, stroke, diabetes, early death, irritability, anxiety, depression. That's what happens when stress accumulates. We have to get rid of the stress hormones. So how do we do that? Well, the first, best, most important, quickest way is through movement. And luckily for me, that doesn't mean a marathon, right? It means that I need to be moving often and all the time. I have to, breathe and stretch and move in order to get those stress hormones. So I'm talking about me as the adult right now, but if you're working with a child, it's the same thing. Kids need to move all the time. That's why we cannot take away recess. It will just make it worse. Okay, movement, breathing, social interaction, laughter, affection, crying, being creative, music, art. There's so many ways, right? Saying it out loud. That's the name it to tame it. I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling. It's blows my mind how amazing our brains are, that when we say it out loud, it sends soothing neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, right? Endorphins to us to help us feel better. So we say it out loud and then stepping away. Those are all ways that you can complete the stress cycle. I just wanted to share this quick story from Nadine Burke-Harris. If you haven't looked up her work, please do. She wrote The Deepest Well, and she's got an amazing TED Talk. But she was at a conference that she said when she was the Surgeon General of California during the pandemic, that was a little bit stressful, right? And she said that one day she came home from work and she was tucking her daughter in, and the daughter wanted a story, and she said, "Oh, I can't, I'm too tired," all this. And her daughter said to her, "Mommy, you've lost your giggle." And that was a red flag to her to know, okay, I haven't been taking care of myself enough. So I'm not talking here about bubble baths and chocolate. I'm talking about what she equated it to. Her whole story was that teachers, educators, therapeutic parents, you are divers going underwater without oxygen tanks and you cannot survive that. A diver needs an oxygen mask, extra oxygen tanks, training, right? A dive buddy, an otter buddy. That's what we need in order to keep going. So put your oxygen mask on is not enough. You're right. You need tools, equipment, resources, training, and support. So how do we do that? Well, here is one way that one school did, and I love to share this. Mayflower Mill Elementary in Indiana. Jessica Harris shared this with me and gave me permission to put this in my book because it has been a great tool for the classroom. And that is a tap in, tap out system, where if the child needs to stay in the room, if they're dysregulated, if they can stay, we want them to stay. If they need to go outside the classroom for a walk or a drink or a bathroom but need support, there's a code for that. If you, because you need to continue to connect and co-regulate with the child, need to go with the child, you need someone to come take your class, there's a code for that, right? There's a code for every situation, and they do this not on a walkie system where other teachers and kids could hear names. They do it on I think it's what's it called? It's a phone system, and we've all got them, and I just forgot it. But I've got one on my phone here that we use all the time too. GroupMe. But you could do WeChat, you could do so many other things. It does take everybody to be on board. I get that. But here is an option to bring to staff meeting to say, hey, how can we better support each other and the children in our classroom? So that's an idea. Other ideas as we wrap up here. I know that you might not be able to see this. These are from my book, so you can see them better. And the other great thing about my book is that it has free downloadable resources. So I just want to turn off this alarm. So you can print them out, and they're free, and you can reuse them. This needs inventory is for the staff. What do we need as far as professional development? What do we need as far as support? What do we need as how to make sure every staff member has an otter buddy in the school, right? We all need an otter buddy. So that's just an idea. And in the book, it goes into more depth and what it could look like. I give some great examples. But I just wanted to throw that out there as there are resources and support out there that we need to utilize. I want to end with talking just a little bit about resilience, because that's the goal for us all, that we can adapt and overcome our hardships. But what we need to know is that we're not born resilient. We're born wired to connect. And so that's how we build resilience, is through relationship. The single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable, committed relationship. And it can be with a parent, but oftentimes if that parent, for whatever reason, is not able to fill that role, it is a teacher, it is an educator. For me, it was a seventh grade school teacher who just saw me and loved me and adored me. I don't know why she did, but she did, and that's all that matters. And I knew that. It was also my grandmother, right? And it was also my mother. So I was lucky enough to have 3 women in my lives who thought I was amazing. And everyone needs someone to think that they just are absolutely amazing. I know that also can sometimes feel overwhelming. We don't have to, and we can't be that for every child. But Dr. Cozzolino teaches us that it's not about grit and perseverance. We in order to survive, it's not that we have to be the strongest, right? We're not survival of the fittest. We're actually survival of the nurtured. So emotional resilience and our ability to learn, right? Because the brain is state dependent. Those two are woven together. So the brain being state dependent means that how we feel reflects on our ability to learn. A scared child can't learn, right? So a hungry child can't learn. All those things. We have to meet the basic needs and the emotional needs in order for that resilience to be built. And it's through those safe relationships with adults. We are the strategy. And Susan, why did I forget Susan's last name?
Hopkins.
Thank you. Susan Hopkins from the Merit Center. She gave me permission to use that. You are the strategy, and I believe that. So whether you're a caregiver or a therapist or a responsive educator, put yourself in the middle of that circle. And if you can radiate the felt safety, the connection, the attachment, and the resilience, in the classroom, that leads to academic success. In the home, that leads to learning and growing and thriving and surviving and everything. So I always end with this quote: fire can warm or consume, water can quench or drown, wind can caress or cut. And so it is with human relationships. We can create and destroy, nurture and terrorize, traumatize and heal. And I choose healing. And I know you do too. That's why you're here. And so I thank you for that. And thank you for your time. And I just want to leave you with just a couple of resources. The podcast has Regulated and Relational has equal parts therapeutic parenting and equal parts trauma sensitive school advice. So listen into that. That's free. And then there are the books. And I think Courtney's been giving all that information out. And then I do have some slides here that have this slide. I'll just leave it there. It has some good suggestions. It doesn't have all of the suggestions, but some good ones to start off with. So anyway, thank you so much for your time.
Ginger, that was great. And I really appreciate your presentation. I've seen you present a number of times, and every time, you just have it put together just in such a way, even more that it's just so compelling, kind of the narrative. So I really appreciate that. I want to share a couple of the comments that we had along the way,
yes,
and a couple questions probably as well.
Yes.
And let folks know, if you're watching right now live, please, if you have a question or comment, you can put that in the chat. We'll have a few minutes for some questions. But let me just get a couple of things that people said as we were going through here. We had a couple more introductions. We had Monica here from Michigan, had Nicole here from New Jersey, who then came out and said attachment is everything.
Yes.
Lynn Stevens from Florida. I happen to know that person. And as you might guess by that name. And then I had a question here, and I kind of think that you kind of addressed this, but I'm going to put it up anyway. I feel confused about co-regulation in the context of someone whose adaptive strategy is dissociation, and if they reject co-regulation out of fear that it is too dangerous. And I know you kind of hit on that to a degree, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I actually love talking about dissociation because I think it's really misunderstood. And I think people fear it, but it's just that you're not feeling, whether it's real or perceived, safe enough in your own body. So there are a lot of things that you can do through co-regulation to help someone feel safe enough to stay present. And the beauty is that it's not as scary or hard, as complicated as you might think. It comes down to that therapeutic dosing. So you're just going to start with small moments of fun and ease, and that this is good, that the reality and the present is good. It's fun. It's safe. And with each person, it depends. And that's where attunement comes in. You can start to see where, okay, that's enough. Then you can just kind of back off and then try again. But the PACE model is actually what I would recommend for dissociation and just having those moments of curiosity. Where did this start? How did we get here? Right? So that we can attack. I don't want to say attack. Look at that, right? And empathy, that I have really hard moments too, where I feel like checking out. That's true for humans, right? And that that's okay. That's the accepting piece. I'm kind of working backwards, and then that playful piece is just about truly having fun and making it light, right? It doesn't need to be serious. We need to laugh. Like, laughter is such a human need. So we need to do that more.
Yeah, great. I've got a comment here from Brianna Kelly. And this is when you were kind of talking about co-regulation. It's easier to do when they're not your kids than when they are. And that's probably always true, right?
Yes, I get that. That's why for my kids, they love their grandmas. They have two amazing grandmas so much that get on the phone and call grandma, because she's just going to unconditionally love you and tell you you're perfect. And you need that when I'm having a moment. So who are your kids' otter buddies, right? Call grandma. Or, like if I'm having a hard day, and my husband tends to be the strong, steady, they can go to him. Like, who else? Because I can't be that person all the time.
Ginger Healy, I never thought you had moments.
Really? Should we get my kids on here? They'll tell you stories on stories.
That's right. Well, and again, this is not about being perfect. This is about giving yourself grace for everyone, right? I mean, that's part of this.
Amen.
Yeah. Crystal said, I sometimes lose myself in co-regulation for my kiddo.
Yeah, like lose your needs and are just focusing so much on the child, or just get wrapped up in it.
Yeah, I'd read it as kind of wrapped up in it, but I mean, you could kind of go either way with that. I mean, because being thoughtful and deliberate about co-regulation, I think, does have a kind of a regulating effect on you, and it gives you a certain amount of control and power. I mean, when you're actually really conscious about, okay, here's my goal. I'm gonna, and it's almost like a name of entertainment, right? When you're having that difficulty and you're able to name those things, I think when you're deliberately co-regulating, it can be very advantageous as well. Melissa said, I love the way you're explaining everything here.
Oh.
Definitely sharing this. And Melissa, of course, well, that's the point of these. Whenever we do these, we really want people to share them. And of course, Ginger, as you know about the audience that we have here, we've got a lot of parents and caregivers. We have a lot of teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, school psychologists, social workers, lots of people. And we always encourage people, share them with your peers, share them with your school, share them with your staff. Melissa also came back and said, Tiffany, you're my otter. But I love the otter buddy thing. I think everybody needs an otter buddy, right?
Yes,
all right, let's see what else we have here. Okay, I've got a question here, and I've not read this whole thing, but we'll get to it. Let's see. Killen asks, how would one help co-regulate a student who engages in self-injurious behavior when escalated? Headbanging, biting self, slamming hand and door, etc. This one's tricky for me because it's so intense.
So intense, so hard. Okay, two things I want to say. Self-injurious behavior, oddly enough, can feel really good to the child. Cutting and pressure, like hitting the head, biting, it has something to do with neurotransmitters, and often people have equated it with the feeling of like a drug high. And so that is important to know, because sometimes we're like, why? That doesn't make sense. Why would they do it? You just need to stop. It can become addicting, and it can feel really good. So that helps us to know that, so that we know how to intervene. We have to replace it with something that feels good. Now, all those oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin, we can hack those. In fact, I've got a slide, but that tells you kind of how to start those hormones. Like oxytocin, for example, that's the cuddle hormone. We typically associate it with breastfeeding, but it's because of that really close, physical, intimate touch. So depending on the kid, because if it's a kid in your classroom, you're not going to have physical, close, intimate touch. But you can do other things that feel good. So I'm kind of circling around this, I know, but you have to figure out what also, first of all, what's the trigger? Why is it happening? So we can prevent and get ahead of it if possible. And then sometimes we have to let it go for a minute, because sometimes if we're intervening in a certain way, it can make it worse. So it depends. I mean, but safety first. Headbanging is very dangerous, and a lot of self-injurious behavior is very dangerous. So this is hard because it really depends on the situation, but understanding why and getting ahead of it can really help. But the co-regulation piece you can do is be there, hold space for it, witness it. I'm here. I see you're struggling. I'm here when you're ready. I'm not leaving you. So the tone of voice, the cadence, the slowing down lets them know you're safe. I've got you. Everything's going to be okay. You have to meet them at the bottom part of their brain first. And then when the moment is over and their breathing is calmed and you can tell they're soothed, that's when you can say, what else can we do? How can we get ahead of this? What happened to start this? And I know that also depends on the child and their developmental level. But being with them, just holding that space, that proximity, if you can't touch them or if that's not helping.
So I know we are just about at our time here. I've got to let you go because you've got another commitment here. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being with us today. And of course, you in addition to the work that you do with the Attachment Trauma Network, you travel to schools to provide professional development. You do a lot of other things. And of course, we've shared your website here down at the bottom so people can get in touch with you. But really appreciate you being here and sharing your sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience. Any final thought you want to leave us with as we wrap up here today?
Oh my gosh. No, that's too hard of a question. Just keep swimming. You're doing great. And just don't go in the water alone, right? Your otter buddy, you need someone to help you, because you can't help the child unless you're okay. So got to take care of yourself first.
Yep. Well, that's a great leaving point. And with that, I'm going to let you go. And I know you need to run off, so I'm going to let you go. And we'll just say goodbye to everybody here, and we'll be back again soon. Ginger, thank you so much as always.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.